Hi, I'm Jasmine. I didn't speak up for most of my life, not when my sister took credit, not when my mother erased me from birthdays, holidays, even family photos. But last Thanksgiving, something changed. My sister passed around her wedding album, and my fiancé froze. He looked at one picture and whispered, "That's your ring." That moment, 5 seconds long, I hadn't set foot in Bellamy's house in almost 7 years, not since Mom's funeral, and certainly not for any family holiday. Yet there I was, standing at her perfectly polished doorstep on Thanksgiving, trying to look like I belonged there. Holding Dean's hand a little too tightly, I felt like a guest at my own execution. The house smelled like roasted turkey, cloves, cinnamon, the kind of nostalgic warmth that would have meant something if it didn't reek of pretense. Bellamy opened the door like a politician greeting donors, wide smile, cold eyes. "Well, look who finally decided to come home," she said, her voice syrupy sweet, loud enough for everyone inside to hear. Dean squeezed my hand gently. He didn't know, not really. This was his first real holiday with my family. First time meeting all of them. First time seeing me shrink down into this version of myself, smiling too much, nodding too often. The living room was full. Dad in his recliner, sipping something dark. My brother Ethan pretending not to notice me. Bellamy's husband Richard gave me the kind of hug that was more about performance than affection. It was Bellamy's house, Bellamy's show, and we were all just actors on her stage. She led Dean and me into the kitchen, where the women bustled like a choreographed dance. "You can just relax," she said. "We've got everything handled, like always." Subtle, the digs never came loud, just quiet enough to let you doubt yourself, but sharp enough to draw blood. I forced a smile and helped anyway, peeling potatoes beside Aunt Margaret, who whispered, "You look tired, sweetie. Still working at that non-profit?" With the kind of tone that didn't need to say more. Dean noticed. Of course he did. He's quieter than most, but he watches. The way his brow furrowed slightly when Bellamy showed off her wine cellar. When she walked us through her newly renovated kitchen, dropping phrases like custom imported Italian marble and inspired by our Tuscany trip. The way she made eye contact with him just a second too long, like she was daring him to compare. I kept smiling so hard my face hurt. He leaned in once, whispered, "Is it always like this?" I nodded. Thanksgiving is not the time. I don't know when it happened, but somewhere along the way, I became the one who never made waves, who made excuses for everyone's behavior. Because what's the alternative? Ruin the holiday. As the turkey was carved and the wine flowed, the conversations danced between politics and property taxes. Bellamy held court at the center, laughter too perfect, stories just self-deprecating enough to seem humble. And then dessert. She brought out a massive photo album, her wedding album, thick and pristine like it had just been printed. "Oh, just reminiscing," she said, flipping open the cover with a flick of her manicured nails. "Richard and I will be 10 years next spring." She passed it around like communion, page after page of posed glamour and flawless lighting. Bellamy in lace, Richard in tails, the kind of wedding that belonged in magazines. Dean leaned closer, curious. Then he stopped. I saw it in his face before he said a word, eyes frozen, mouth slightly open. He reached toward the page, touching it like it might vanish. "That's your ring?" he whispered. Time slowed. I turned to the photo. There it was, clear as day, on Bellamy's finger, my ring, or so I'd been told, the family heirloom, his grandmother's. "Meant only for you," Dean had said the night he proposed, in the middle of our tiny apartment with takeout boxes on the counter. I didn't speak, couldn't. Dean leaned back like someone had punched him. He looked at me, then quickly away. And Bellamy. Bellamy smiled like a cat that had been planning this moment for months. I excused myself quietly, walking to the downstairs bathroom without making eye contact. My legs felt like they were carrying sandbags. The drive home was quiet, not peaceful, not awkward, just quiet in that way where silence starts to suffocate you. The radio hummed out old holiday songs, low and scratchy, like it knew better than to interfere. Dean kept his eyes on the road. Both hands gripped the steering wheel like it might try to jump out of his lap. I watched him from the passenger seat, the ring on my hand catching the streetlights in sharp little flashes. Finally, I said, "So, want to tell me why my sister had my ring first?" He flinched, not visibly, but I felt it in the way he blinked twice, quick, like trying to reset a screen. "I don't know. Maybe it's just similar, a popular design or something. My grandma, she never talked about it much." He didn't sound confident, just practiced, like he'd told the story enough times that he didn't even know what parts were real anymore. "You said it was hers, that it was one of a kind." "It felt like it was," he mumbled. "I mean, look, come on, what are the chances?" "Exactly," I said, staring straight ahead. That drive felt longer than it was. Every turn was a question I didn't want to ask, every stop sign a chance to jump out and walk. But I didn't. I stayed. Back home, I didn't take my coat off, just walked straight to the bedroom, sat on the edge of the bed, and stared at the ring. It didn't even look the same now. I mean, it did, but it didn't. Like learning a secret about someone you've known for years. Suddenly, everything familiar turns unfamiliar. I kept seeing Bellamy's face, how she flipped to that page so casually, how she smiled like she'd won something. Not loudly, not proudly, just precisely. I grabbed my phone and Googled vintage engagement rings, 1950s, 1960s, Art Deco settings, halo cuts. I kept scrolling until every diamond looked the same. Maybe Dean wasn't lying. Maybe he didn't know. But that's the thing about betrayal. It doesn't have to be deliberate to cut you. My mind spiraled. Was Dean ever really mine? Or was I just convenient? The version that fit better into the frame she no longer wanted. There was a moment, months ago, when we were visiting my dad. Dean had paused in the hallway, looking at an old photo of Bellamy from prom. I thought it was nothing at the time. Now, I wasn't so sure. I remembered something I once read. The worst kind of betrayal is the one dressed as coincidence. I stood up. He was in the kitchen, pouring himself a glass of water. I didn't give him a chance to drink it. "Where did you keep the ring before you proposed?" He turned slowly. "What? Where did you keep it?" In the bedroom closet. Inside a box." "Why?" "Show me." He hesitated, then nodded and led me back to the room. He pulled out an old wooden box, familiar, scratched on the edges, nothing fancy. Inside were some papers, an old watch, and a folded receipt. I took it. Estate Jewels Restoration, $624, dated 6 months ago. The word restoration blurred before my eyes. I blinked hard, trying to stay grounded. "You bought it," I said. "You bought it from a stranger. You lied." Dean stepped back, hands raised like I'd swung at him. "I wanted it to mean something. I knew you'd like it. It looked right." I stared at him. "So lying felt right?" He opened his mouth, then closed it again. I took off the ring. No drama, no flourish. Just slid it off and placed it on the nightstand. Then I walked out of the room, shut the door behind me, and turned the lock from the outside. On the couch, I sat in the dark. "This isn't about jewelry," I whispered. I woke up stiff on the couch, the edge of a throw blanket barely covering my legs. Dean must have come out during the night, tried to smooth things over in that wordless way of his. A blanket instead of a conversation. A gesture instead of an apology. The apartment was too quiet, not a comforting kind of quiet. The kind where you listen harder, waiting for a sign that things aren't as broken as they feel. I walked to the bedroom. His side of the bed was empty, the sheets still tucked. He'd left for work early, or left to avoid me. I made coffee, burned the toast, and didn't bother starting over. I sat at the table, chewing around the char like it might give me answers. My phone buzzed, but it wasn't from Dean. I ignored it. I pulled up my gallery, scrolled past selfies, food pics, holiday group shots, then stopped on one, Bellamy in her wedding gown. She looked beautiful, of course. She always did. But now I saw something else. A tilt in her chin, a flash in her eyes. Something smug. Some betrayals don't come with shouting matches or dramatic scenes. They come quiet. Slipped under the door. wrapped in silence. I typed a message to Lila. What if the person you love was just a shadow of someone else's past? I hovered over the send button, then erased it. I didn't want sympathy. I wanted answers. And maybe a little revenge. I went to plug in my dying phone. The charger was missing. Typical. While digging through drawers, I found an old storage box shoved behind some winter scarves. I hadn't touched it in years. Inside, birthday cards, ribbons, an old Beanie Baby with a missing eye, and a photograph. My 9th birthday party. I remembered the cake, the bounce house in the yard. The picture had me and Bellamy with our parents, and a young man standing next to Bellamy, his arm draped around her shoulders like it belonged there. Faded ink scribbled at the bottom. Belle D, 2003, match made in heaven. My breath caught. That was Dean, same jawline, same smile, just younger. In 2003, I was 9. That made him at least 20. I sat down, picture trembling in my hands. It didn't make sense. It made too much sense. I couldn't remember much about that day, but something came back like a whisper from a locked room. A fight. Bellamy and Dean in the garage. Bellamy yelling, "Don't tell her!" before slamming the door so hard it shook the frame. I thought she meant our mom. I thought it was about chores. But now, I grabbed my coat and walked. Needed air. The neighborhood looked like a snow globe. Plastic reindeer, inflatable Santas, twinkling lights masking everything broken underneath. You grow up thinking your family is supposed to protect you, I muttered. But what if they're the ones who handed you over? At the end of the block, an older woman on her porch was talking to her granddaughter. You're not crazy for connecting the dots, honey. That's just called waking up. The words stopped me in my tracks. Waking up. Yeah, that's what this was. A rude, shattering, overdue awakening. Dean hadn't just been Bellamy's boyfriend once. He had been around, long enough to know things about my family. Things I hadn't even known. I headed back. My fingers felt numb, but not from the cold. From remembering what I'd tried to forget. Back home, I pulled out a notebook and started writing. Not journaling, strategizing, names, dates, places, photos. I taped them up inside my closet, stringing them together with yarn like I was solving a crime. Maybe I was. That summer. Bellamy once told me, "We don't talk about that summer." I assumed it was about our parents' separation. But now, I realize that summer was when Dean disappeared from her life and quietly reappeared in mine years later. Was it fate or just convenience? Was I always meant to be the replacement? I stood staring at the timeline, lips pressed so tight they hurt. One gap stood out. Bellamy's college graduation. I remembered going, the speeches, the sunburn. Dean had been there too, standing near the back, away from the cameras. Why wasn't he in any photos? I whispered to the empty room. This isn't over. I pulled into Bellamy's driveway as afternoon light faded, the sky painted in pale pink and gray. The air smelled like magnolia blossoms and old pine, sweet but heavy with memory. I was here to pick up things I'd left. A photo frame, a sweater, the brooch box my grandma once held. Walking up the path, I felt every step echo. Bellamy opened the door before I reached it. She wore a dress soft in color, but her smile was sharp-edged. Dean stood just behind her, polite nod, posture stiff. "Hey," she said, "glad you came by." Inside, I saw her moving picture frames, on the mantel, side table, shelves, wedding pictures, family photos, Dean beside her, arms brushing. In one spot, I saw behind the glamorous wedding portraits a small childhood picture of me, tucked almost into shadow, only a sliver of my face showing. Bellamy straightened a new frame on the mantel, blocking that edge. I paused by the wall. While sipping tea in the kitchen, I watched my mother looking at a large group photo. She said, "Look how fine Dean looks with her. So kind, so devoted." I forced calm, then asked, "Mom, was Grandma's brooch ever in any of the wedding photos? The one she gifted me?" Mom's smile flickered. She paused. "I don't remember." Dean stepped away, eyes shifting. "Maybe I misplaced it." he said weakly. I murmured something about going to see the photo wall. I walked over. One photo, taken just a few months before Dean proposed, caught my breath. In its corner, in the reflection of a mirror, I could see the brooch, pinned to Bellamy's dress. Heart pounding. My mother had orchestrated this substitution long before I ever noticed. I didn't yell. Rage settled into my bones. I excused myself to the spare room, clutching Grandma's sweater, soft and thin, but comforting. Memories flooded, her hands pressing mine, her words about cherish what's yours. All those times I felt invisible made sense now. I texted Angie. You were right. Mom had that brooch. She gave it to Bellamy in photos. My fingers shook. I fetched old negatives tucked in a drawer. There, Bellamy wearing the brooch from years before I knew its significance. I walked out without a word. I could feel every eye on me as I left. I called Dean later. His voice was calm. Too calm. I asked for proof. Receipts, negatives, genealogy of the brooch. He faltered. Why digging up old things? He asked. Because what should have been mine isn't just about things. It's about truth, I answered. That night, I held the brooch in my hand, its weight warm against my skin. It was untouched, never worn. It belonged to me. I realized then they weren't just denying me something. They were denying that I was seen. A silence settled over the house. I could hear my own breath. I tucked the brooch into my bag. Tomorrow, I would go to Mr. Holt's studio. I would see those negatives in proper light, and I would ask, out loud, why they pretended it was never mine. The sun was dipping low when I pulled into Bellamy's driveway again. I'd told myself I was just stopping by for the leftover pie and the table linens I forgot in the dining room, maybe a framed photo or two I'd left by the mantel. But the truth was, I didn't feel finished. The house smelled like cloves and cinnamon, too familiar. Bellamy's laugh drifted from the living room. I heard her speaking to Mom, light but pointed. Gifts say a lot about who someone really cherished, she said. Sometimes you don't need a will to know who meant more. I stepped into the room just as she lifted a delicate box, cream-colored, tied with her signature navy ribbon. I knew that box. I remembered it from years ago. I once believed it held Grandma's gift for me. It used to sit in my room. Then one day, it was gone. My stomach turned. I didn't say anything. Not yet. Bellamy opened the box slowly, like it was theater. Inside lay the brooch, blue stones around a gold pin, tiny pearls dotting the corners. Grandma's brooch, the one she promised to me. This meant a lot to Grandma, Bellamy said softly, looking at our mother. I think it should stay with me. Mom nodded with a kind of pride that only made the room colder. Of course, sweetheart. Grandma always had a soft spot for you. I stepped forward. That brooch was mine. Bellamy glanced up, not startled, annoyed. What? I kept my voice steady. Grandma gave that to me. I was there when she pulled it out of the velvet pouch. She said, "This one's for Jasmine, for the quiet strength." Her words, I remember them. Mom looked uneasy now, shifting in her seat. Well, maybe she changed her mind. I thought, maybe she meant it for Bellamy. You didn't wear it after all. No, because it disappeared, I replied. And now I know where it went. Bellamy laughed, a small, fake laugh, brushing past the moment. We're really fighting over a pin? I didn't answer. There was nothing to say. In that silence, I saw it all clearly. They knew. For years, they knew. I left the room before they could see me cry. Out in the car, the night was still warm for November. I gripped the wheel, breathing deep, trying to settle the shake in my hands. I played Grandma's voice in my mind. Keep what's given with love. That's how you remember where you come from. I opened my phone and texted Angie. Did Grandma ever say the brooch was mine, or did I make that up? She didn't text back. Instead, she sent me a voice memo. Grandma's voice, soft and clear. You're my little star, Jasmine. I want you to shine in my brooch when I'm gone. I came home to darkness, the porch light flickering like a signal I didn't ask for. The night air was thick, Autumn leaves drifting past the glass windows. I didn't turn on any lights inside. I stood for a moment in the hallway, letting the silence settle. Then I closed the door behind me, heavy. On the phone, I scrolled through the family group chat. One message: "Beautiful gathering tonight. Bellamy's house looked amazing." No "love you, sis." No "missed you." Just perfect images for everyone else. I typed a reply. "Glad you enjoyed it." I sent it. I stared at the screen. Nothing. Not a single heart or acknowledgement. Silence louder than any message. My mother called, voice light but brittle. "I never said your ring wasn't yours," she said. "I only wondered if they looked similar. Maybe you misremembered." Misremembered, as though memories can be swapped like photo frames. I said, "Then why is it always Bellamy being shown off? Why never what belonged to me?" Mom faltered. "Families compare, dear. You know that." Her voice trembled. I'd heard this before, erosion disguised as care. She said, "I thought I was protecting you." I hung up. Quiet rage gathered in my chest. My skin prickled with betrayal. Later, I checked Bellamy's feed. Photos of her shaped by soft light and compliments in captions. Smiles. "So proud of my first daughter," Mother had written under a photo of Bellamy and Dean standing together. My reflection in the device's glow felt small. Dean texted me, "You looked beautiful last night." That meant something, momentarily comforting, but then I saw Mom's like on Bellamy's post, everyone's approval aimed at her. My heart was heavy, but something inside shifted. Disillusionment. I paced the living room, walls seeming to close in. I thought about all the times I held my tongue, swallowed my disappointment. Maybe it was time not just to be heard, but to be seen. I stood in front of the mirror and repeated to myself, "This is mine. I was never wrong." The words tasted metallic, but they felt true. I made a decision. Tomorrow I needed proof. I will ask Mother to show me purchase records. I will ask Bellamy to tell me the first moment she wore that brooch publicly. I wanted receipts. I wanted negatives. I wanted someone to admit that they had let me believe what wasn't mine. Midnight came. I lay in bed, the room too quiet. I reached over for the brooch sitting on my nightstand, feeling its cold weight. I touched its edges, thinking of Grandma, thinking of the last time I felt certain. Through the wall, I heard laughter. Bellamy's voice, maybe Dean, maybe Mother. Soft, comfortable in a world that wasn't mine. I opened my phone. The photo of the brooch in Bellamy's hand glowed in the dark. My fingers curled. If I don't speak now, I'll always be invisible. Tomorrow, I send that email to Mother, Dean, maybe Bellamy too. Not angry. Not dramatic. Truth. Morning came without promise. I sat at my kitchen table, the invoice spread out in front of me, heart pounding like a drum. I brewed the tea Mom liked, weak, no sugar, just to have something to hold, something warm. I stared out the window at Savannah's pale sky, thinking, today I either break the chain or live with it forever. I called Angie. Her voice was soft. "I'm going to the studio. I want him to pull the negatives." She didn't ask why. She just said, "Okay." That meant all the pieces might finally show themselves. I packed the box with the brooch, the invoice, a photo of me when I was small. I left the house before the sun was high. The drive was quiet. I spotted peeling paint, old shutters, trees dropping leaves. The city looked ordinary, as if nothing big was happening. That contrast made my blood boil. I walked into Mr. Holt's photo studio, musty smell, old cameras, shelves heavy with frames. He looked up, nodded. I placed my items on his desk. "You said you kept the negatives for family portraits and weddings." He swallowed. "Some are faded, some lost. But yes, I have one box." The box sat there, thick, a lifeline. Mr. Holt gently lifted the top. He pulled out a negative strip. I held my breath. One photo, Bellamy in her wedding dress, the brooch pinned securely. Next image, Dean beside her, and behind them, smaller, tighter, was me. Hand reaching out, touching something. The brooch, my hand. Evidence of what I'd believed was mine, the edges frayed where the negative curled. I saw it all in the light box. I saw the moment that was stolen. "I never meant to think you'd need to see these," Mr. Holt said. Regret met apology in his voice. I clenched my teeth. They didn't just take something physical. They erased the moment I owned it. I returned home. The photo wall stood in the living room, more frames than I remembered. Bellamy with Dean, Bellamy with their child, Bellamy smiling in elegant dresses. I pointed to a new frame, a child's face beside Bellamy. "Is that child yours or ours? Because I see Grandma's brooch, I see Dean's smile, but I don't see me." Bellamy stiffened. "You weren't there," she said coolly. Mother said nothing, just arms crossed. Silence, but crowded. In the garden outside, I buried my face in my hands. Memories flooded. Birthday dinners where my name was passed over. Photos where I existed only in shadow. Moments I had forgotten. I arrived at the venue before the guests, late afternoon light falling soft over white columns and flower arrangements. I wore the brooch under my blazer, pressed close to my heart. In my purse, I carried the invoice, the negative, and a note I'd scrawled early this morning. "Today is truth's turn." The sky over Savannah was pale gold, beautiful, calm, and it mocked me with its peace. Guests began to drift in. Bellamy floated down the aisle in her gown. Mother beamed like she'd staged this moment for years. Dean stood nearby, watching her move. Chairs lined the lawn. Soft music played. I stood back, observing it all, waiting for my cue. During the toast, Mother rose with a champagne flute and called for quiet. She raised the glass and said, "I'm so proud of Bellamy and Dean. They've built something. Legacy, love, everything I ever hoped for." A breath of silence. Then she added, "And Jasmine always knew her place. She supports, she smiles, she cheers on Bellamy." The word place cut me sharper than any ring. Bellamy laughed, small and false. Dean's eyes flickered. I felt all heads turn, a murmuring sweep over the crowd. A cousin muttered, "What a role model sister." I forced a smile. Bitterness bloomed in my throat. I closed my fist around something hard in my purse. This wasn't just about jewelry. It was about the story everyone believed. After dinner, Mother asked for attention. She held a sealed envelope, white, elegant. "Grandma's will has been notarized recently," she said. Gasps. She read names, house, heirlooms, the brooch collection, and then a line that made my chest collapse. "Items identified as gifted to Jasmine at Grandma's death." I stood, voice trembling. "Grandma gave me that brooch. I never saw documents. Until now." The room shifted. Eyes wide, whispers rising. I looked at Mother. Bellamy's face hardened. I asked, "Why does the will list what belonged to me if you always let Bellamy act like it was hers?" Mother's cheeks flushed. Bellamy's smile tightened, but didn't disappear. I sat alone at the small dining table in my apartment, fingers resting on the envelope with my name in Grandma's handwriting. The paper had yellowed, but the ink was still sharp. I took a breath and opened it. "My dearest Jasmine," it began, "you were never less. Only quieter. I saw the way you listened, the way you gave up space without being asked. That brooch, it's not just gold, it's recognition." I read it twice, then a third time, and I didn't cry from sadness, just warmth. A kind of quiet validation filled me. She had seen me, not just as support, not as background, but as someone who mattered, who always had. I leaned back, let my eyes close, and thought about every dinner I sat through without speaking, every time I stepped aside, every photo I wasn't in. And now, for the first time, I felt full. Not because they said I mattered, but because she knew, and now I knew too. The next morning, I opened the last of the boxes I'd brought back from my parents' attic. Dusty plastic bins filled with trophies I didn't win, programs from school plays I wasn't in, certificates with Bellamy's name, but stored in my box. I didn't feel angry. I felt ready. I started sorting. Things to keep. my third-grade teacher's note about my quiet strength, a candid photo of me and Grandma, our hands overlapping. Things to let go. Bellamy's dance recital awards, a picture of a family vacation where I stood behind a tree, barely visible. On my wall, there'd always been a photo of the whole family, posed, smiling. I had always hated how I was cropped near the edge. I took it down, replaced it with a picture I'd taken during my solo hike last fall, mud on my boots, sun on my cheeks, and no one else in frame. I updated my LinkedIn that afternoon. New title: Head of Community Engagement. I'd been offered the role right before Thanksgiving, but I hadn't felt worthy of it. Now, I did. I owned every bit of it. A week after the wedding, a cousin sent me the photo album. I flipped through it with curiosity, not resentment. Smiles, cake, guests, and one photo caught my eye. The backing looked uneven. Carefully, I peeled it. A folded slip of paper fell into my lap. "You are more like her than anyone. Don't let them shrink you,"